Did you know that in some places, what used to be like a once-in-70-year flood event, well, it's now happening roughly every 9 years?
That's a staggering
It
statistic.
really is. It's not a small shift. It's a dramatic escalation. So today we're doing a deep dive into the profound and honestly the lasting impact of clear cutting on floods, how often they happen and how bad they get. Our main source for this deep dive is this really groundbreaking study. It spanned decades, done by the University of British Columbia and just published in the Journal of Hydrology.
Right.
And our mission today is really to unpack why clear cutting's impact seems to be so much more severe and lasts so much longer than maybe we commonly think.
Exactly. And it's important to stress this isn't just about, more water running off the land immediately after cutting. This research shows it's a fundamental, long-term reshaping of entire landscapes. And that has significant, sometimes devastating consequences for communities downstream. It really challenges a lot of older assumptions.
Okay, let's unpack this then. What was the core, the really dramatic finding?
Well, the study found clear-cut logging can make extreme floods up to 18 times more frequent.
18 times. That's huge.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's not just frequency. These floods can also be more than twice as large as they might have been otherwise. So that example I gave, the once-in-70-year flood. In some of these watersheds, that now happens, on average, every 9 years. It's almost routine.
And the persistence is key too, right?
Absolutely. These effects aren't short-lived. We're talking over 4 decades, 40 years.
What's so fascinating, I think, is how this really pushes back against some conventional ideas in forest management. It shows it's not simply about, the total amount of forest you remove.
Right.
This study really highlights that it's critically about where you cut, how you cut, and the specific conditions on the ground when you do it. Those details, those nuances, they seem to dictate the severity and, crucially, how long these impacts last. So, how did they figure this out? How are these findings established? This wasn't just a quick look, was it?
No, definitely not. Like we said, this comes from a really groundbreaking, decades-long study by UBC, and they used data from one of the world's longest-running forest experiments. It's at the Coweeta Hydrologic Laboratory down in North Carolina.
Yeah, Coweeta's famous for this kind of long-term ecological research. The study's design there was quite clever, actually. Researchers compared two neighboring watersheds. Pretty similar, but one faced north, the other faced south.
Okay.
And both of these areas were clear-cut way back in the late 1950s. So that gave them this incredible long-term data set, watching how things changed over decades.
Decades of data, that makes a difference. And who are the key people behind this? Well, the paper mentions Dr. Youn Zalila, a hydrologist at UBC Forestry. He was the senior author. And Henry Pham, who's the first author, a doctoral student there. They also worked with Peter V. Caldwell.
A really solid team. So here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The study talked about the surprising role of what they called seemingly minor landscape factors, like just the direction a slope faces. How could that make such a big difference in how a watershed reacts to clear cutting?
It sounds small, doesn't it? But the results were stark. It's not just about the trees being gone. It's about how the absence of trees interacts with things like sunlight and moisture. So when they looked at the specific slopes, let's take the north-facing one first.
Okay.
That slope naturally gets less direct sun, right? So it tends to hold more moisture, cooler soils. After clear cutting there, the impact was profound. Floods became, get this, between 4 and 18 times more frequent.
Wow.
Average flood sizes shot up by 47% compared to before they cut. And the biggest floods, the really extreme ones, swelled by an incredible 105%, doubled in size.
Doubled. And the other slope, the south-facing one?
Almost nothing. In complete contrast, the south-facing watershed,
Yeah.
it experienced virtually no change in flood patterns.
Even though it had the exact same clear-cutting treatment.
Exactly the same treatment. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, well, it just hammers home the incredible complexity of these hydrological systems. And it really underlines the need for, highly localized, site-specific approaches to forest management. One size fits all clearly doesn't cut it. These subtle differences have huge effects.
Which probably explains why some of the older ways of predicting floods didn't quite get it right. Those standard models people used often had pretty simple assumptions, didn't they? Like, cut X% of trees, expect Y% more water runoff. What did this study say about those?
Yeah, those assumptions, well, this study shows they're just too simple. They're inadequate. Those older models often fail because they just don't account for the extreme and kind of erratic flood patterns that can pop up after these big landscape disturbances.
So they might predict a general rise in water, but not these huge, frequent spikes.
Precisely. This new research shows forest treatments don't just, raise the average flood level a bit. They can fundamentally reshape the watershed's entire flood regime. They make those once rare, catastrophic events much, much more common. So yeah, this study really validates the call from hydrologists for better analysis methods. It shows you absolutely need to apply proper probabilistic tools and critically use long-term data to really grasp these impacts.
And that long-term aspect, you mentioned it earlier, but one of the most concerning findings was that these flood effects in that north-facing watershed anyway, they lasted for over 40 years.
40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. That confirms these forestry treatments aren't just causing temporary blips. They lead to profound, really long-lasting changes in how a watershed handles water.
And this immediately raises an important question, doesn't it, for current forest management. These findings are directly relevant, especially in places with similar kinds of terrain and ongoing clear-cut logging, like right here in British Columbia.
So could this research be applied locally? Well, Dr. Alila actually noted that the model they developed in this study, it can potentially be used to predict which specific parts of BC might be more at risk of extreme flooding right now, based on past logging and landscape features.
That's useful. And thinking even bigger, could this model help understand recent major floods? Like the terrible Sumas Prairie floods here in BC back in 2021, or maybe even recent floods elsewhere, like in Texas. Could it help figure out how much was land use change versus, say, global warming?
Potentially, yes. It provides a tool to help disentangle those complex interacting factors.
Yeah.
How much is the baseline landscape change? How much is the overlay of changing climate patterns? It's not always easy to separate them. And ultimately understanding how all these different factors, the slope direction, the soil type, the logging history, and the changing climate interact, well, that's becoming more and more critical. Especially, as climate conditions shift and we see more extreme weather, getting this right is crucial for protecting downstream communities. The risk is real.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening? I think the key takeaway from this deep dive is pretty clear. Clear-cutting isn't just an immediate environmental issue. It fundamentally changes our water systems. It significantly boosts flood risks for decades, potentially generations. And those impacts are surprisingly dependent on specific, sometimes seemingly small, details of the landscape.
Yeah, it really shifts the perspective. So maybe a final thought to leave you with. As we know we're facing a future with more extreme weather, how does knowing about these deep, long-lasting, landscape-specific impacts of logging, how might that reshape how you think about land use decisions? And maybe what other questions does it raise for you about the unseen, the sort of hidden ripple effects of our choices on the natural world all around us? Something to consider.